What's going on there, folks? Good evening. It is the Earthmaster here, back on the live stream with an update video on this Sunday, February 5th, 2023. It's about 9:02 p.m. here along the West Coast in California. And the latest activity, well, we're looking for a 4.1 somewhere out here. I'm guessing it's right here in this mix of earthquake activity. It's been quite a while since we've seen earthquake activity at this magnitude, at this scale, in this area of the world. 4.1, the latest earthquake here in this cluster of earthquakes. And I guarantee you, folks, there's a lot more than what the USGS is showing. They're only going to show basically 4.0 and above. We'll check out the EMSC model here in just a little bit. So, what's going on out there in Turkey? What's going on along this plate boundary? There's a lot going on. The 7.8 earthquake struck earlier this evening here, West Coast time, at about 17 kilometers deep. Just a few minutes later, we've seen a pretty large 6.7 strike following that 7-pointer as an aftershock, and many other earthquakes there in the mix as well. Let's go ahead and check out the main quake. And by the way, the pager system that the USGS uses in terms of estimated economic losses and estimated fatalities, red for the pager. So quite a bit of damage being reported out there amongst the region of the Turkey area. A significant area was affected, and also a significant population density affected as well. And that has to do with the depth of the earthquake. If this 7.8 struck, say, for example, 300 kilometers underneath this area, we would not be looking at the damage that has happened today. And that all has to do with the depth of the earthquake. Much shallower earthquakes tend to create more shaking, more damage out there. The DigiFillet reports being picked up across the region. I've seen some reports of it being picked up. Well, let's check it out here. 7.8 will produce some major damage locally with that magnitude and depth, but also it will be felt pretty broadly. It looks like down here in northern Egypt as well, feeling some of this shaking from that earthquake. Areas obviously around Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, all over the place. And I do appreciate the comments there from the folks coming in tonight on the last update video reported some shaking around their community. I appreciate the input 100%. So the USGS did put out a little notification here in regards to this earthquake activity that struck earlier this evening in Turkey. And we'll go through it just a little bit here to give you guys a general idea of their perspective of what this earthquake, or how this earthquake occurred. 7.8 earthquake occurred in southern Turkey near the northern border of Syria. It was followed up there very shortly, 11 minutes later, by that 6.7 aftershock. According to the USGS, the earthquake resulted from a strike slip faulting at very shallow depth. The event ruptured either near vertical left lateral fault striking northeast southwest, or a right lateral fault striking southeast northwest. Now, there's a lot of wording there used by the USGS in the vicinity of this earthquake, but there is an important player here, and that's a triple point junction between a couple major plates. We're looking at the Anatolia area, Arabia, and the African plates. There's a lot going on. Let me show you guys this area that I'm talking about here. This is the general plate movement of the USGS. Of course, the Arabia plate here in the, it's kind of yellow here on this end. And the African plate as a whole down south. There's a couple different areas here that are separating, obviously. But the majority of the force, the majority of the plate stress does occur up here along the plate boundary to the north. Now, let me finish reading what these guys are chatting about here. Although earthquakes are commonly plotted as single points on a map, they rupture planes that have dimensions. A magnitude 7.8 strike slip typically ruptures a fault system roughly about 190 kilometers long and 25 kilometers wide. That's pretty big. And they go into historical data. Now, historical data has been very quiet in this area. I'm not even joking. There hasn't been a lot of activity. In fact, I went ahead and pulled up technically 6.5 and above for this area. And check it out. I went back to about the year 1000. 6.5 and above. This area has not seen any major earthquake activity such as what we've seen today. Even the 6.7 is above anything that we've seen historically in this area. And that says a lot there, folks. That tells me right there something is, I think, potentially brewing on the larger size up here along this northern end of the plate boundary. Now, up here, it doesn't really show the complete plate boundary up here. It kind of separates, but you can pretty much draw a red line across this area as listed up here on the plate boundary map. Let me show you guys. Okay, this is the area, Turkey area, Syria region. Let's see the completeness there into the Eurasia plate. Now, this area has seen some activity. This little plate boundary here has seen some activity historically, but much further to the northeast of what we're seeing here today. We've seen a 6.8 back in 1905, 6.7 back in 2020. Okay, so I want to show you guys the recent earthquake activity. Look at what's going on out here. Okay, so we had that 7.8 occurring locally here in central Turkey and 17 kilometers deep. Look at this broad-scale migration of earthquake activity, this movement, if you will, along this major plate boundary. We don't see that too often on this type of a scale. 50 miles here is going to be the... hold on a second here. I got some... This program right here, it bugs me. Not USGS, but the G program. It gets a lot of errors. So, as we can see here, 50-mile scale down here, we're looking at probably a migration of earthquakes over 125 miles here along this major plate boundary. This is all new earthquake activity stretching up into portions further into Turkey along this plate boundary. We don't see that too often. Most of the time when a major earthquake hits, it's around the epicenter is figured out. In this case, the 7.8 is right here in the blue circle, and then we see aftershock activity occurring within the vicinity of that major earthquake, that epicenter. But we're seeing an unusual pattern here of migration of earthquakes well over 100 miles away along the plate boundary, such as these earthquakes here, 5.0, the latest quake occurring there in eastern Turkey. Now, these have been reviewed. These are not guesstimates. These are not, just earthquakes maybe showing up falsely from far away. These are legit earthquakes that are migrating along this plate boundary. And that could have a little bit of potential in terms of seeing maybe some potential further larger scale activity out here. Not only within the region of the 7.8 that struck here, but within this plate boundary. I think, even though historically, let's check out historical data again. Let me show you guys. Historical data shows nothing above 6.5 in this area since records have been kept. And the USGS does a pretty good job of reporting that historical data as well. I went back to the year 1000. If you go along this plate boundary, things are they're active, but they're only in the upper sixes, so to speak. And a lot of this is older movement. So I think the potential is there, folks, to see something much larger along this plate boundary. Very possible. And just because we haven't seen it historically doesn't mean that that it's not there potentially. Just like this activity today. Who would have thought, the potential's not there for a major earthquake of this size. Historical data doesn't show it. But sure enough, what do you know? we get that activity kicking up here. And it's in somewhat of a very complex area of the Turkey region. If we look at the last, let me show you guys here. Before we go into that, I want to show you guys the EMSC model. This is the earthquake activity that's occurring here, folks, in the Turkey area. Let me see if we got a total tally. 52 earthquakes here on this map. 52 earthquakes of quite a bit of magnitudes. Going down the list here, 5.2, the latest larger one there in the Turkey area. Going back down the list, there's quite a few 5s, quite a few 4s, quite a few 3s, and all this activity, of course, leading up towards the big one, the 7.8. But this is all aftershock activity into the Turkey region. So far, we've seen a 6.7 earthquake, the aftershock sequence there. But if you remember, a couple updates back here, we were kind of chatting about the uptick regionally within this area. Turkey has seen actually quite a bit of earthquake activity, Western Turkey. It's always Western Turkey, a lot of activity. Now, I can't go back here on the Earthquake 3D globe to kind of show you guys. I could, but then we overload the system here, and it's all covered up by the activity today. So we'll have to go back here the last, we can go back to the last 30 days, 4.5 and above. And technically, there really hasn't been any larger quake activity here in this area. We did see a couple smaller quakes around the vicinity of 4.7, 10 kilometers deep back in the middle of January period. But there has been some smaller quakes, 3s and 4s, lower 4 here in this area. Regionally, this whole area has been above background levels as far as activity goes. So, you know, kind of the spot that gets hit is the most built up region, and that's going to be this area that we've seen today. But I can't really say for certain that we are done with the activity with this type of migration. It is a major plate boundary that sits up here. And if we've seen this type of activity in California stretching 125 miles up and down the San Andreas Fault, then we could assume maybe something else is brewing upstream. So we'll continue to watch this area. I think it's important to watch the migration of aftershocks or potential foreshocks in a region there that could be leading up to something bigger. 7.8 obviously is a large earthquake. Historical data within this little square, within this little rectangle that I drew here, shows, well, today's earthquake, 7.8. There was another 7.8 further up north into the northern Turkey area back in 1939. I'm not seeing any 8-pointers, but it doesn't mean that the potential is not there. We'll continue to watch this, of course, and report on it, folks. And as I mentioned, I definitely appreciate all the comments out there in regards to the felt shake reports. So what are we looking at far as regionally elsewhere? Is there anything else popping up here around the region? Let's see. There's some further activity westward here. A 4.0 coming in into the area of western Turkey. Has not been reviewed by a seismologist yet. But with all this earthquake activity kind of kicking up here, it you know, it's possible we could get some false readings. Not saying it's technically false or true, but still, we look for other areas that may be showing some seismic activity increasing following all this large-scale activity, because, you know, just because there's a release of pressure here from who knows how many years built up of strain in this region, there's still a lot of uncertainty onto exactly where this earthquake struck. But a lot of times when we see earthquake movement, it does put further strain on areas nearby, such as what we're seeing here today. There's a migration of earthquake activity, and more specifically, a pretty good swarm of activity here, roughly almost 100 miles there to the northeast of the epicenter of the 7.8. Despite the relative seismic pressure of the epicenter, it says obviously southern Turkey and northern Syria have experienced significant and damaging earthquakes in the past. But I would say nothing like what we've seen today. So, this is the professional wording here from the geologists, so to speak, there at the USGS in regards to, their opinion on what took place here today. But again, pay attention to this migration. We'll see how that plays out. This thing did produce quite a bit of P waves and S waves across the globe as far as the seismic signature goes. Most of the time, these larger earthquakes do produce that type of signature. This is Yellowstone National Park there in Wyoming. That is going to be the 7.8 signature. Quite a few S waves coming in. Doesn't look like it stirred up anything there in Yellowstone, but kind of wanted to show you guys the signature of that large earthquake. All right, let's go ahead and move on and see what we have here. By the way, on the live stream, I do have a station keyed up there. Is that Anacara? Is that right? Anacara? I'm guessing, hopefully. Turkey. That's going to be the station there around the Turkey area monitoring activity. Again, the globe is kind of, or at least the Earth that we're spinning on, is kind of rebounding from the seismic waves. So that's kind of why these seismic signatures look a little wavy. It hasn't really calmed down yet. So we'll watch this station here in Turkey for some further activity. Obviously, these darker readings showing up on the seismic signature are earthquakes, but due to the seismic wave that's still kind of ringing the Earth like a bell, I have to wait for it to calm down a little bit to show some of these earthquakes picking up there. All right, let's see what else has happened here. Do we have any unusual activity kicking up here? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Couple earthquakes. I think we did have one down here in New Zealand. Kermadec Islands up here along the Kermadec Trench, 10 miles or 10 kilometers deep for that 5.1. This earthquake activity occurring following the movement over there in Turkey. It does, if you picture the Earth, if you will, in your mind, a jigsaw, well, no, I guess you can use a jigsaw puzzle in a way. When one portion of this jigsaw puzzle moves, obviously the strain and the pressure and these pieces, so to speak, move around. It's been happening for a very long time, and we've seen activity kick up far, far away due to just little adjustments. I shouldn't say little. This would be a large-scale adjustment, thousands of miles away. So I'm still kind of waiting to see what this, how this plays out. Again, with the general movement here of the plates, Eurasia plate up here to the north, that could add further strain. Obviously, some further strain up in the regions of the areas north of here. That could obviously include portions of Russia, Middle East. I think we need to watch these areas pretty closely. All right, further activity hitting over here around Japan as well, into the East China Sea. This one 126 kilometers deep for a 4.2. Haven't really seen any major adjustment here around the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. This earthquake here coming in this morning. Still watching this one here for a big earthquake. It's just a matter of time. We got a lot of strain, slip built up in that area. The Aleutian Trench. A little bit of activity occurring throughout the region today. Mainly up around the Cook Inlet area up through Anchorage. Any adjustments? Thousands of miles away here along the west coast? I don't really see it. Not yet, anyway. Sometimes it takes a little while to maybe potentially see some activity, but we did see a little earthquake right around that time that 7.8 struck off the coast of, actually inland, Northern California, but down dip 22 kilometers here into the Cascadia subduction zone of 2.5. A little deeper earthquake there into the Cascadia. Prior to that, 3.0 Northern California, well off the coast. But that one into the Mendocino Ridge. This area has been showing quite a bit of activity here recently. In fact, the southern end of the Cascadia showing heightened activity over the past couple months. Let's check out the tremor map here tonight and see what's being reported. Only got, only 10 earthquakes, or 10 epicenters of tremor. Now this activity is going to be definitely not like earthquake activity, but occurring down dip into the subduction zone here underneath this land about 45 kilometers deep. Man, goodness, I got hiccups all of a sudden. But looking at less than normal activity down here in the southern end of the Cascadia, we've been seeing quite a bit of movement down here south that has completely stopped, it appears. Let's see what else we have throughout California. No major adjustments. A little bit of activity up around the Ridgecrest area and Southern California a little bit, but it seems as though, excuse me, that movement has kind of come to a halt here following that 7.8 out there in Turkey. Not seeing anything within the last couple hours in Southern California. And believe it or not, yes, things can be affected from these plates thousands of miles away. Remember, a jigsaw puzzle piece and momentum and pressure gradients out here amongst the plates. New Madrid zone showing a little bit of activity. Looks like we had 2 earthquakes there earlier this afternoon. This is going to be prior to the 7.8, 1.3, and a 1.0 that is in the New Madrid seismic zone, a major seismically hazardous area in this area of the states. Seeing a 7.8 like they had back in the 1800s would be ultimately devastating for this country. A little bit of movement up around the Puerto Rico Trench kicking off here. Got a couple low-grade 3s north of Puerto Rico. A little bit of swarming kicking up there as well to the southwestern edge of the Puerto Rico region. South America, some of this activity from yesterday. Let me check out the EMSC model. That is just crazy. I'm not even joking, folks. That's a lot of activity. If you really think about it, what's causing all that stress, right? All the years, who knows how many years of stress built up out here, just piling in on this massive amount of earthquake activity. That's very impressive. South America, we do have a 3.0 coming into the Chile area. Pretty shallow earthquake. One of the more recent earthquakes out there on the globe. Again, right now things are kind of positioned here across the Turkey area, but we'll watch. We'll definitely watch here, maybe for some unusual movement that may be indicating some regional stress in certain areas. USGS showing 17 earthquakes, but obviously we know there's a lot more being reported underneath that not being reported underneath that 4.0 threshold. Tremor activity, as we mentioned, is pretty minimal, but I do want to go check out. I want to see if we got any of the surface waves traveling across the Pacific Northwest here. At the same time, we'll check out earthquake activity around the crater area of Mount St. Helens. I'm a big fan of looking at all these signatures, that are being picked up across the globe from a major earthquake. Look at that. Unbelievable. That is the S waves, and that is the signature from the 7.8 in Turkey showing up at Mount St. Helens. Our normal seismograph stations are going to look like this. Very thin lines. If you've ever seen a drum, an earthquake drum, with that, it's kind of like a pin and a needle moving back and forth. If it's moving back and forth, there's an earthquake. But if there's a wavy pattern like this for a good hour or so, goodness, that's about an hour. That means that there was a major earthquake somewhere across the planet, and that kicked off for a good amount of time. Look at those wavy lines showing up there. Unbelievable. That's pretty crazy. A little bit of earthquake activity yesterday. Looks like across the Mount St. Helens area, a couple small spikes. But again, we'll kind of see how this plays out, folks. I mean, a major earthquake like this does tend to have consequences elsewhere. Not only at the epicenter, but also not only regionally, but it could be along one of these major plate boundaries. We'll just don't know yet. We'll kind of have to see how that plays out. Let's see, what else do we have? Not related to space weather. This earthquake definitely not related to space weather. We're looking at very calm conditions. So a lot of people like to ask, well, is this earthquake activity related to all the solar weather events? Well, there's not a lot. Space weather, as you know, in my updates have been very minimal. So this definitely not related to solar weather activity. There is a little bit of auroras up there around the higher latitudes, Canada region, Antarctica area as well. But there's definitely not a huge potential of seeing any major auroras. Slight chance up there in Canada. We did see about G3, no, not G3, KP index of 3 kicking up here earlier this evening. No major solar flares expected. We are watching a sunspot around the northeastern and the southeastern limb of the sun as it rotates into view here in the coming days for some potential elevated solar weather conditions. But for now, it's fairly calm out there. All right, guys. I think it's best just to be prepared. Earthquakes can happen at any moment, any given time. And I think it's definitely noteworthy of today's events to make sure you have an earthquake plan. Have a backup plan, folks. Something happens, it's most people, obviously get out of the building, get out of the house. They want to immediately get out of harm's view, but also at the same time, you got to protect your family. You got to make sure they're safe. And important documents. If you feel shaking, of course, I want to get out of harm's way. But at the same time, I want to make sure I grab what's important to me. My wallet, for one, right? Just in case something happens following the earthquake. You could have a house fire. It could be anything. You got to make sure you have some important stuff. Your ID, wallet, cash, credit cards, stuff like that. It's very important for survival, obviously, following a major event. But anyway, thoughts and prayers going out to the folks there in the Turkey, northern Syria area. Watch this migration, folks, and see how it plays out. There's obviously migration heading towards northern Turkey area, and also over here further to the northwest. So things are under the gun, so to speak, and we'll just kind of see how this plays out tonight. Make sure you guys subscribe here while you are on the channel. We do provide daily updates here in terms of earthquake activity, solar weather activity, and volcanic activity as well. And also, if you are going to subscribe, please hit the notification bell. It helps us out, and hit that like button while you're here as well. We'll chat you guys a little bit later, and make sure you have a good night. It's just, man, incredible, and I just can't stop looking at this amount of earthquake activity out here. It's a lot. So unfortunately, when we get a lot of earthquake activity confined to one region, it tends to make the globe pull off some of the quakes that may not be off the 24-hour threshold. So on that note, I am going to increase the time frame here just a little bit, which might add a few more quakes to the globe beyond the 24-hour threshold. I just want to make sure, though, that we're covering all the earthquake activity out here over the past 24 hours, and it's pretty important. I try to keep that 24-hour threshold up here on the map. All right, guys, have a good night. We'll catch you a little bit later on. Stay safe out there, everyone.